I'm here to talk to you about bloating. And I don't mean bloated ego, although you might have one. I have a saying in my office sometimes, better a bloated ego than a bloated belly. And I see lots of patients with bloated bellies. Abdominal bloating to the point where, they have to loosen their jeans, they have to loosen their pants, they can only wear expandable sweatpants because their tummy gets so bloated, both men and women. And gassy, and painful, and uncomfortable. Now, that is probably one of the most common symptoms I see in this office. Well, not the egoic bloating, but the abdominal bloating. Now, there are a couple very easy and common things that can cause this and that we can do to resolve it. Let's go over a few things. Abdominal bloating, gassiness, discomfort. 1. First of all, are you eating too much? And is what you're eating not agreeing with you? Now, not agreeing with you can mean that you have an intolerance to certain foods. It can mean that you have an allergy to certain foods. Let's look at intolerance. Probably the top of the line is lactose intolerance. That's an intolerance to the lactose sugar in dairy products, all dairy products, not just goat or just bovine or just sheep. All dairy products have lactose in them. And lactose intolerance occurs when the pancreas no longer makes lactase, which is the digestive enzyme to digest properly lactose. And if that lactase isn't there, the lactose doesn't get digested well, and you get reactions in the GI tract commonly that cause discomfort, bloating, gassiness, and in some patients, diarrhea. Not all patients diarrhea, but about half the patients will also have concomitant diarrhea and loose stool with it. That is one form, and a very common form of intolerance. There's also gluten intolerance or celiac disease. Now, we're not talking about allergy, we're talking about intolerance. Two different animals, okay? The gluten intolerance or celiac disease is when you eat gluten from wheat, barley, rye, and most oats. That gluten causes a reaction in the intestinal tract, an immunological, inflammatory, local reaction in the intestinal tract. And that reaction causes anything from bloating, gassiness, and discomfort to severe abdominal pain, diarrhea, even severe constipation in many patients. And if that goes untreated, the symptoms in the disease process can emerge from the gut and become systemic, leading to a lot of other disorders, from thyroid disease to arthritis to asthma and diabetes. So, celiac disease. Now, how do we test for those two very common intolerances? Oh, by the way, celiac disease, the new numbers, 1 in 100 people in the Western civilized world have celiac disease. It's most prominent in Irish, Welsh, Scottish, English, then Italian, German, and some Norwegian populations. So 1 in 100, that is a lot more people than we ever expected 10 years ago. But that's what the new literature tells us. So how do we screen for that? Lactose intolerance, you can screen by having some blood work done. You're challenged with a set dose of lactose. And it can be painful if you have true lactose intolerance. It's not a fun test. You have your blood test done before and you have it tested so many times after the challenge of lactose. And they're looking to see how much lactose you absorb into your blood. And if there isn't any absorbed, then you have lactose intolerance, and especially if you're having symptoms because of the test. So that's a clear and easy way to do that. Secondly, and you can't do it. A lot of patients say, well, I'm just not going to eat dairy, and that'll work. No, because you can have an allergy to dairy, and we don't know then if you get better if it was because you had lactose intolerance or an allergy. And that's important to figure out, and I'll tell you why in a bit. Next is screening for celiac. Now, I've talked to folks about this, and I've written articles, and I've done some videos, and if you want to, you can search those down. I'm not going to get into great detail here, but there are 3 primary ways of testing for celiac disease. I like to do all 3 if possible. One is looking at the genetics. Do you have the 2 genes commonly associated, or any of those variants with celiac? Do you have any of the positive serologic markers or immunologic markers, anti-gliadin antibodies, transglutaminase, anti-endomysial antibodies, etc.? Or do you have a positive biopsy? Those are the 3 ways of diagnosing celiac, and I think all 3 should be looked at. So those are the 2 prominent intolerances we find. Next are food allergies. You can develop allergies to foods. The most common food allergens are corn, wheat, rice, chocolate, peanuts, dairy, eggs, etc. They're some of the ones at the top of the list. Now, an interesting piece. I have seen a lot of patients with asthma and a lot of patients with seasonal allergies who have strong allergies to grass pollens, but eat grasses every day. What are grasses? Most of your grains are grasses. Corn is a grass, wheat's a grass, barley's a grass, rye is a grass, oats are a grass, rice is a grass, wild rice is a grass. So all of these are grasses. So if you have known allergies, inhalant allergies or seasonal allergies to grasses, one of the first things I would advise is stop eating grasses completely. Take them out of your diet. Another way of testing for food allergies, besides just eliminating them and see what you do, is being tested. Now there are 2 kinds of allergies you might have to foods. One is an immediate allergy that's mediated by IgE, which is an antibody that mediates this certain types of immediate allergies. So you can do an IgE RAST. It's a blood test. And you can be tested for a number of different foods or for suspected foods. I usually do in my office about a 92, 96 food panel on an IgE RAST for my patients. So we look at some 92, 96 foods. And then, of course, we identify those foods which are allergic. We have the patient stop eating those foods for approximately 6 weeks. If their symptoms get better, aha, we're on to something. And then what we do is have them challenge each separate food over a period of time. And when they reintroduce the food, if the food then causes symptoms, we then note the symptoms that are caused and note that this food is an allergic food causing problems. And then it's the choice of the patient if they continue to eat those foods or not. My advice is don't if they're causing symptoms. Another allergy you can have to foods is delayed allergies. And there's some gray area and controversy in the medical literature about delayed allergies to foods. But probably the best way of testing is an IgG4 ELISA. That's a blood test as well. And it's looking for delayed or IgG-mediated allergies to foods. And again, you want to do a larger panel. You want to get a good 50 to 100 foods involved in that. Insurance doesn't commonly cover that testing, but it is available. And you would also look for reactive foods in that category. So testing, identifying and testing for food allergies and eliminating those foods and challenging those foods are very important at really determining truly if these foods are reactive for you and if they're causing the gas and bloating and distension that you're dealing with. Lastly is second to last, is hypochlorhydria. Hypochlorhydria is not making enough acid in the stomach. Patients with hypochlorhydria can have a lot of distension and gassiness and discomfort and something called gastroparesis, meaning that the food just kind of sits there and the stomach doesn't process it easily. And so if that sounds like some of the symptoms you have, you might want to be tested for hypochlorhydria. And the easy way to get tested is a Heidelberg test. That's with a string attached to a capsule. You swallow the capsule, and the string is taped to the side of your face. And in the capsule is a pH meter, or not a meter, but a pH sensor. And that sensor senses the pH of your stomach acid in your stomach, sends a radio signal to a machine that reads the radio signal and then plots a graph, basically, and tells us the level of pH in your stomach. Now, pH is related to acid and alkaline. And then what they do in the test is they challenge you with a set dose of bicarbonate, an alkalinizing agent, and then see how long it takes your stomach to acidify that agent. And that's plotted on a curve, and then you're diagnosed as being hypochlorhydric or achlorhydric, meaning having no hydrochloric acid response at all. Hypochlorhydria can, as I said, be a big causative factor for gas, bloating, and this sense of, oh man, food's just sitting there. And then lastly, not having the right bacterial environment in your GI tract can cause a lot of gas and bloating. So, and ironically, here's the thing, because it's really hard with patients, when you want to put the good bacteria in, the first couple weeks of replacing the good bacteria, they get even more gassy and more bloated as you're trying to get the whole new neighborhood set up in the GI tract. So you want to get rid of the crack houses and the junkies that are living in your neighborhood, if you will, gastrointestinal neighborhood, and you want to sort of get the folks that are going to cut the lawn and keep everything beautiful, and you want the neighborhood to be beautified again and safe. And the best way to do that is with human-sourced lactobacillus and acidophilus bacteria. Still the studies show us that the human-sourced are some of the best. And you want to do a complex of about 5 or 6 of these different bacteria, lactobacillus, acidophilus, and a number of others, bifidobacteria, etc. And you want to take it in high enough doses to really colonize the GI tract over a period of time. I usually tell my patients I want to see them do about 40 billion units of bacteria a day for about 6 to 8 weeks, and then they can cut that down in half, and then make sure that they're eating and adding to their diet a lot more fermented foods. We're not talking about fermented liquors. We're talking, although that's fun too, we're talking about fermented foods. What do I mean by that? Well, a good organic sauerkraut, when you open the bottle, it fizzes. There is a new product that's out just about everywhere now, kombucha. Kombucha is a fermented product made from a mushroom. And kimchi is one of my favorite. It's a Korean dish of fermented cabbage and onions and garlic, and you can make it really spicy. It's one of my favorite things as a fermented food to have. And then, of course, there are kefirs and yogurts for those people who are not allergic or not intolerant to dairy products. So there are a few of the major causative factors for simple gas, bloating, abdominal discomfort that should be evaluated and should be treated correctly. So, enjoy.